Welcome everyone. We're going to just give it a minute or two before we start to make sure that everyone can enter the room. Welcome everyone. We're going to give it another minute just to let everyone enter. We've got quite a few attendees coming and the room is filling up. So we'll just let everyone enter and then we'll kick off. I'll give it 30 more seconds before we start. Okay, it's 2 minutes past 6 here in the UK, various different time zones where everyone is, and I'll start the webinar and welcome everyone to the short-term rental industry predictions 2022 webinar that's been kindly hosted by Hostaway. We're up for a treat tonight. We've got some absolutely fantastic panelists discussing the industry, and if the practice session was anything to go by last week, it's going to be a lot of fun. There's going to be a lot of information and it's going to be a really jam-packed hour. And before I kick in and introduce all the panelists or ask you all to introduce yourselves, I'd first like to hand over to Marcus, the CEO of Hostaway, for a few words. Please, Marcus.
Thank you very much for joining tonight. I was visiting VRMA in San Antonio this year, and it's amazing to see how alive the industry is. It felt exactly like Airbnb opened back in 2015. Lots of new companies, lots of new people. But I did something quite unique this year as well. I actually attended a few sessions, and that made me realize that the people on stage, they have a lot of knowledge and they have a lot of information that they can't really say out loud, but you can read it between the lines. And as we've launched our marketplace this year, we have over 100 companies integrated on our platform in the industry. I realize that not everyone is attending these conferences. Not everyone even has time to go to the sessions. So let's bring it out here. Let's get the top leaders of the industry together and let everyone join to hear about the predictions for next year, because I know everyone here personally, and we got pretty strong opinions. I don't expect everyone to just nod here on this webinar, but we're gonna do our best to share our view on what's gonna happen next. Because right now is a really exciting time for the entire vacation rental industry. And yeah, over to Jessica. One more thing about the attendees. I had a look at the list. We've been doing these webinars for over a year now at Hostaway. This is the biggest one so far. What's really interesting though is that we got a broad variety of industry people here. We have many of our software partners, a lot of property managers, of course, but also there's quite a few of our competitors. Welcome, and of course a bunch of hungry VCs who want to learn more about this industry. So I just wanted to wish a very warm welcome to you all.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you. And before I ask the panelists all to introduce themselves, I'm pretty sure you don't really need introductions, but just in case there's the odd person that hasn't heard of you all, I will get you to do that. And opinions are definitely going to be flying in this webinar, which is exciting to hear. So if I could ask you, Alex, do you want to start? Can you do a quick intro, please?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thanks very much for the invite. My name's Alex Nigg. I'm the founder and CEO of Properly. I've been in the industry for 10 years or so now, I think. I host myself. I have been hosting for 10 years. Properly is an operations platform and quality management platform aimed specifically at owners and hosts. So at where most of the supply these days is coming from, we engage with owners and hosts to help them get better at what they do. And we engage with property managers, listing platforms, and other supply providers in helping them onboard, retain, and engage the owners. So that's what we do. Thanks very much for having me. I'm very much looking forward to the fireworks that this will be.
Fantastic. Thanks, Alex. And just to say fireworks is still kind of around Guy Fawkes here over in the UK. So if I've got a bit of fireworks in the background, it's because of that. They start going off as soon as it gets a little dark. But now, Simon, I know you need no introduction, but please just give us a quick hello and a quick intro to you and AJL, please.
Thank you, Jessica. Thanks, Hostaway and Marcus, for having me as well. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the attendants. My name is Simon Lehmann. I'm the co-founder and CEO of AJL Atelier. We call ourselves the go-to partner in the vacation rental industry. Wherever your pain points have, give us a call and we hopefully can help you. We're dealing with property management companies all the way to very large private equities, technology companies. We do a lot of consulting growth, strategic consulting, but we also do M&A, and we call ourselves the people who hear the grass grow in the vacation rental industry. And we're really glad to be here today and sharing our views on the predictions of 2022. Thanks, Jessica.
Excellent. Welcome, Simon. And Richard, I know you've got your glass of wine down there in Devon. Can you do a little intro, please?
It's not wine, Jessica. It's a non-alcoholic beverage. So I'm head of business development for Properly, and Alex has given you a very good narrative on Properly already. So I've been hanging around this industry for about 20 years. I've owned a small portfolio. I've owned 2 management companies and exited from those. I know Marcus because I owned a property management software company as well, and he streaked way ahead of where we ever got to. Yes, and I've also been a VP of a master lease company that didn't see the best days in COVID. So very excited to join this group, and I know it's going to be possibly a little contentious.
Great, thank you, Richard. And briefly, I'm Jessica Gillingham. I'm the Managing Director of Abode PR, which is a PR and content agency, and we work with technologies that are transforming work, life, and play in the short-term rental industry and hotel tech and some other industries now. And I'm really pleased to be here with all of you. And I'm just going to do a few little housekeeping things. The webinar is going to finish on the hour, so we don't have much time. We've got so much to talk about, so we'll kind of pace it quite fast. But I would love to invite the audience to ask any questions. If you want to hear anything additional to what we're talking about, any questions, do put it into either the chat or the Q&A box, and I will try my best to kind of pick out the best questions to ask. And also tell us where you are. I know we've got somebody here from Maui saying aloha, which is great. And do tell us which parts of the world you're coming from and what companies you come from, because I know we've got a lot of attendees. So, right, let's get started. So in our chat last week, when we were talking about, the content for this webinar, there was loads going on. There was so much information flying. You had so much to say, guys, that I was literally like flabbergasted there for the 45 minutes in the chat. And some of the themes came through that we were going to talk about. And I think the first theme that we can talk about for next year is about the category awareness. And I'm going to start with you, Simon, because I know that you've talked about this a lot at VRMA and also, through LinkedIn, etc., about what's happened to category awareness over the last 2 years, and then where you see it going next year. So I'd love to start with you.
Thanks, Jessica. I already had my hand on the button, so it's great. So let's get this going. Yeah, I mean, I'm not as a veteran as Richard, but I've been in the business for 16 years, and in 2005, when we met Brian and Carl Shepard, the founders of HomeAway, we were at a category awareness of 5%. So nobody knew what vacation rental was really all about, especially in the US. Fast forward 21 years, we're at 80%. And pre-COVID, we're around 40%, which Focusrite studies have shown. So pre-COVID, we're about 40%, and it stagnated for a couple of years. So we couldn't increase category awareness because we sort of came to our limits in terms of attracting more guests to our vertical. Now we're at 80%. And the recent report from Deloitte just underlined that as well. Which was produced in the lead up of the going public of Acasa. We've seen some great, wonderful reports. One is the Deloitte report. We've also seen a Goldman Sachs report. So all of a sudden we're seeing reports that we have never seen before because there's people who are interested in the category. So it's not just the tourists who are interested in the category, but the investment world is interested in our category more than ever. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So we're not at 80% category awareness. What does that mean? And it says that the ones who came new to the category, 75% of them want to come again. So what we're saying here, and this is how I closed the Vitor conference last week, is saying if we're not able and professional enough to grab that tailwind, we're going to lose that category awareness again, and we will go back to maybe 60, maybe 50% again. So I think now we need to ultimately lift our game substantially to make sure these ones who have had the experience because of COVID, hotels were shut, vacation rental was a great alternative, go there, they had a great experience, 75% want to come back. And now we really need to be very quickly professionalizing this business even more and provide guest experiences and a seamless user experience.
Are we going to be able to do that? Are we going to be able to keep to that 80%?
My prediction would be no, because I think the hotels are not sleeping. They want to come back very quickly. They want to see these customers come back to them as well. We still struggle. We know what the non-renters were looking for pre-COVID: hotel-like amenities, hotel-like services, et cetera, seamless engagement and guest experience. And yes, I mean, tech adoption is ramping up like crazy, but I think, we need to do a hell of a lot of work to make sure they'll kind of continue to come back with us.
Gonna fight you a bit on that, Simon. I think the vacation rental industry is entering a completely new age. I just saw something interesting in the Airbnb quarterly report. They said that this year they've had stays in 100,000 cities or locations. But the interesting part with that is that they had 6,000. So 6% of these different locations were places where nobody had stayed in an Airbnb before. And what that tells me is that there's going to be a lot of new locations. It's closely tied to the residential real estate market. A lot of people this year have moved to locations that they never considered moving to before. But the same thing goes for vacation rentals. There's a large opportunity to grow outside the traditional big cities and vacation resort areas. And that's something that hotels will have a hard time competing with, because you can't just go out in the middle of nowhere to a small town and set up a hotel unless you know that there's going to be demand for years. But setting up a vacation rental business can be done quite quickly.
No, absolutely. I agree on that one. But, these were second and third tier markets who benefited greatly. We've seen second and third tier markets, we've seen great supply growth and everything else, and also good demand growth for that purpose that you said. People just wanted to get out no matter where they went. The question is that going to maintain? So I think the second and third tier markets need to be very careful what they're going to do next in terms of attracting these type of customers. And I'm not saying this is directly related to the vertical of vacation rental, but just second and third tier markets have benefited because people were driving into destinations and there was a good alternative in terms of accommodation. But, I think also that is in danger for these second and third tier markets to maintain very popular as prime markets are come back to life, also in the hospitality or hotel space. So I think we have a lot more competition while we gain market share. When you gain market share, you need to fight competition, and that's as easy as it is.
I promise I'm going to disagree as much as possible with Simon today. So, there's actually one thing I agree with and a little bit that I disagree with. I think on the question of awareness, what's the driver of the awareness? We may like it or we may not like it, but it's not property managers. The reason why our industry has massively grown in awareness is because of one factor, and it's called Airbnb. There is $17 billion that have been invested into the category over the last few years, and of the $17 billion, $10 billion were invested into Airbnb. Airbnb created a $100 billion market cap, a massive brand, and that's a very, very big part of the reason why this industry has gained so much in awareness. Now, what's going to sustain that awareness? We desperately need supply. The entire industry needs supply. That supply is going to come from hosts. It's going to come from individual owners, because no matter whether you like it or not, the property managers can't manufacture supply. They don't have any supply. They have to either convince an owner to hand over property to them, which means the owner has to decide to do that, or the owner is going to do it themselves. So as a result, yes, we're going to continue to maintain and grow awareness. Actually, I think we're going to grow against hotels as an industry. There's going to continue to be a huge amount of money flushing in the industry. Private equity is eager to throw money at the industry. It's been, sort of crypto and venture and vacation rentals have been sort of the things where people make money. The big challenge is we are wishing for professionalization. But it's not going to come easy because it's the owners that will drive the growth, and those owners need to be educated. We need tons of them. We need 2 million of them. And that's going to be a really, really difficult one. So we will gain awareness. So on that, I disagree with Simon. And the hotels will continue to push into the industry because that's where the growth is. So Marriott's not going to be the only one. And Marriott's seeing huge amounts of growth. But as an industry, professionalization is still very much wishful thinking, and we have to tackle the problem when it happens. It's not the property managers that are going to professionalize, it's the owners, and we have to do that at scale.
Before I want us to talk about the professionalization and the supply issues, but before we get on to that, I read somewhere yesterday, which I actually can't remember where I read it, but it was somewhere, is that hotels are now back up to 80% occupancy of where they were in 2019. And so can we talk a little bit about that, the kind of the competition, if you like, or the battle or the consolidation of hotels and short-term rentals? Are all hotels going to start putting kitchens in now so that they become short-term rentals? Or, are people just going to, go back to the hotels regardless of the professionalization, but because that's just what they actually would prefer? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I have a few. I'll concur with Alex on the last one. The professionalization bit before jumping to hotels, it's going to be an absolutely primary concern. Just one thing in this dialogue we're having, it's always interesting to split between vacation rentals, which seems to be the name that everybody's using, and urban rentals. And we are seeing big differences in those sectors in terms of everything, technology, hotels, and everything. But very briefly, I visited the Urban Living Festival in London a few weeks ago. I visited a few hotels and a WeWork facility. And if anybody said the hotels know what they're doing going forward, I think that's a contentious statement, because they are hedging their bets right now. So we're witnessing hotels looking at the short-term rental industry saying, hey, these guys, it's easy entry. They got no regulation. They can mint money. They got Airbnb pushing bookings to them. So what are we going to do about it? We can lobby against them, or we can actually join them to a degree. So we're witnessing flexibility in the hotel build structures going forward, so that they're turning into hotel apartments, remove the staff, done too much cleaning, do automation. So I think we're going to see many more of these hotel apartments, which look very much like urban vacation rentals, and that's going to be really interesting when the large hotel chains like the Hilton right now saying we don't have enough cleaners, so we won't clean your room. We'll just give you a discount. You don't clean your room at home every day, do you? So yeah, I think we're going to see we're going to see a lot of challenges coming forward from the hotel lobbyists as well.
I mean, one thing I agree. And it's happening very quickly as well. Maybe I clean my room every day, but that's not you, Richard. So, we won't debate that. But, we talked about convergence in supply in 2008, but we got confused because we used that word convergence because vacation rental inventory was sold on OTAs. Because the consumer was educated, hey, there's a choice between a hotel and a vacation rental. That was 2007, 2008. Now we're actually seeing the actual supply converging to the point that Richard is making to say, okay, and this is why we call that hospitality 2.0 or even 3.0, where everything is becoming more blurry. And I put the prediction up that maybe in 3 years, there won't be a VRMA conference anymore and a hotel conference. It's going to be one conference. And I think that is, in a nutshell, where we see the supply going to, because we see now so different type of models moving into the supply conversation. Now we see companies like an Iconic Capital who teams up with Highgate and owns 3,500 apartments in the United States. That's a game changer. They own the asset, but they play short-term rental brutally hard. And so they're competing in our sector, they're competing in the hotel sector, and they're building a hotel-like product. So I think the hotels need to be smart. And, the 80% you mentioned, Jessica, for me, what does that mean? How many hotels have closed in the meantime? How much supply has gone away from the market? In Barcelona, I feel that you can probably buy about 50 3-star hotels right now. So I think the supply is definitely not going to be there. And even they say they're at 80% level. I think this is not something you can look at it globally, and they've been definitely hit harder than what we have, and we have not. We have seen the numbers, we have tailwind, and we need to do something. I think that the supply is definitely converging more, and we need to be smart about that too, because the consumer has choice, and as long as the consumer has choice, we need to make sure we can accommodate that.
Yeah, from Hostaway's point of view, we have the luxury of seeing actual companies before they even are founded, and we've had a massive growth in terms of new customers, but also existing customers growing this year. And it's been very interesting to see how recurring the theme of hotels are. I agree that some hotel chains have done this years ago. Accor has invested into this space, and Marriott, they've done so fairly successfully as far as I know. But I think there's a large amount of hotels that are waking up right now, and they simply don't know what to do. They used to be lobbying against Airbnb, and now they want to join, and they're a bit too late to the party. And there's a massive knowledge gap. It's not about putting in a kitchen in a hotel room and thinking that's it. The entire traveling experience is entirely different. And for a lot of people coming from the hotel world, they're having trouble understanding why are the consumer demands so individual. Why is the market so fragmented? Because if you go to a big city and you have a hotel, a 3-star hotel, it's pretty much the same as another 3-star hotel in that same city. Whereas if you deal with vacation rentals, you can have entirely different clienteles. You can have, even in the same locations, you can have entirely different properties. And that's a level of added complexity. It's like driving a rally car and suddenly going into the Formula One. We're the Formula Ones here, and what I'm seeing is that the property managers are actually taking over these hotels. Like you said, Simon, there's a bunch of 3-star hotels for sale. Well, that's exactly what our customers are doing. They're just taking them over, and I don't see the same friction. For a property manager to take over a hotel, running for like a short-term rental is much easier than for especially a large hotel company to suddenly enter a space where you have so many smaller companies competing against you, because those smaller companies can compete with you with quality, connections, and service.
Yeah, you're 80%, Jessica, as well. It's easy to fill a hotel at €1 a night and get 80% occupancy, and that seems to be the threads that I was hearing for sure. I've got a question for everybody here, actually. Digital nomads, long-term stays, all slightly alternative versions of what happened before COVID. I mean, is the mist clearing? Are we seeing it? Is Airbnb going to see a lot more of that longer stays? Are we going to see more digital nomads? Are we going to go back to normal?
Yeah, I want to pick that up, Richard, because I want to quote Carl Shepard from Vrbo, and he said it's just all bollocks, and I agree with him. I'm a father of 5. I'm not going to go anywhere. My life hasn't changed, guys, and I think millions and billions of people's life hasn't changed. So we need to be very, very careful that we're not blinded by some hyped consumer behavior, because now you can live and work wherever you feel like, have longer stays, combine work with a bit of holidays and all that stuff. Let's face it, the vast majority of the individuals who are rooted somewhere, have a family, have a business, have a job, they cannot just jump in a car and live and work from everywhere they want. So I want to be very careful on that assumption. We have seen some trends, obviously, Richard. We have seen longer stays. Yes, we have. We have seen shorter booking windows. We have definitely seen some trends, but let's face it, it's also been restricted. I mean, let's remember something. America for Europe has just opened up on Monday, right? So, we're coming back. Asia is still closed. I mean, we are still far away from normality to make any predictions how things are going to settle when we get on top of this pandemic. So with these predictions, I will be super careful. But Alex, you want to jump in on that?
I want to jump at this opportunity. I very like this, but for once, I really, really disagree with you. I think this is a big deal, and I think the reason why you're wrong is for two reasons. Number one, you're European, and number two, you have been working from home for a very long time. So let me get into both of those. I think the work remotely, it's not as big as a deal or not as big as a game changer as a make it, but it has a big impact. And here's why. I'm not talking about the sort of your Silicon Valley poster child that leaves Google and lives in Costa Rica for a year. That's going to be the exception. And I agree with you on that, Simon. What's not going to be the exception is more and more companies, in particular in the US, that have more flexible schedules where people work 3 days of the week, they work in the office, and 1 or 2 weeks of the work, they work from home. Now, the reason why I said you're European, so you don't see that, is you get your 6 weeks of vacation, and that's very, very much accepted. In the US, that's not the case. Americans don't get 6 weeks of vacation. And there's already a big impact in terms of the opportunity to travel, because if you now 2 days a week, you can work from home, you can take that long weekend. And it's not just Thanksgiving and sort of the few holidays. So it's got a big boost to demand across the board from the biggest market in the world.
I disagree. I disagree with you because I just saw something yesterday, which I find very interesting to throw in here, and they're going to shut up. Google is paying its staff less who do home office than the ones who come to the campus in San Francisco. So tell me, how does that fit?
Absolutely, it fits, because you know how flippin' expensive it is to live in Silicon Valley. I mean, Google can pay you 15% less, and you make a lot more if you move to Idaho or Denver or any of a million places, Austin, Texas, which is where everybody's heading right now. But again, I don't want to focus on Google and people who will start working remotely all year round. That will be the exception. Yes, in tech it's prevalent, and there's a lot of it. I'm talking about Joe Blow that works for a large American company, who can now, because work from home is becoming more and more accepted, can now spend maybe 30 days a year where they work from somewhere else, or spends maybe a day a week or 2 days a week. Makes a huge difference, because those are all incremental bookings that we as an industry are going to see. I'm not talking about the Google person who moves to Hawaii for a year. That I agree with you. We're in this little bubble here in Silicon Valley. It's a lot of it. There's a lot of this here. It's everywhere. But that's not the rest of the world. The rest of the world is much more flexible approach to working a few days a week from home. And I think that's here to stay. It'll create a huge amount of demand for all of us. And Airbnb is feeling it. They're not feeling it just in the US, they're feeling it all over the place. That's been a driver for this. And that's why their numbers keep on going up. That's, by the way, look at their product announcements. Why do they focus on things like Wi-Fi? Huge push, because if your vacation becomes dual mode, it's now work and vacation, then the Wi-Fi absolutely has to work. So the biggest quote unquote cleaning problem, and I'm calling it a cleaning problem because it's part of this sort of housekeeping part, is make sure the Wi-Fi works, which is not a cleaning issue, of course. And stays with pets. Why are they making such a big push into stays with pets? Well, if you travel more frequently, now you're going to take your pets with you. So there's big shifts across the industry. This is going to drive a huge amount of demand, not the stuff that people talk about, the Google person moving to Costa Rica, but sort of Joe Blow that now can work 1 or 2 days a week from home. And particularly in the US, where it makes a huge difference, because Americans aren't used to that. Like, they didn't have that much vacation.
I also agree with Alex and disagree with you, Simon. I think that the change and move towards remote working and flexible working will have a big impact. And I sometimes think about myself as a typical guest, and I'm taking my family to Canada next year for an extended period. And just we'll be working remotely. And somebody's just put in the chat, that's a very important point, is it's fine to work remotely if you have no kids and be the digital nomad, but as soon as you get a family and your kids are in school, you are stuck to the holidays. But I think it's growing. And I spoke to a business owner this morning, and he was saying that he's allowing his team to work you know, a month in wherever they want to, if they want to. And I think that's going to be a growing trend. But let's move on. And I'd like to talk about the supply problem and the supply issue. And when we were talking last week, one of you was saying that, you know, 90 to 95% of inventory is all privately owned. And we need, or Airbnb needs 2 million properties in order to reach its valuation, or you know, to fulfill its valuation or whatever. And I just want to talk about how is that, where do you see, where's the solution basically to this supply problem? Is it really an issue? What's going to happen next year? And also tied into this about the RBO versus the professional property managers. And Richard, do you want to kick us off here?
Well, I'd like to kick you off. I just know that Alex has got a very concentrated thought process on this in particular, because I work very closely with him, particularly when it comes down to numbers. So I will actually hand this off to Alex, because he's almost certainly going to have data that he can pull out of his sizable intellect.
So thanks for putting me on the spot. I was not prepared, but I'll try anyway. I mean, I think, Jessica, you're 100% right. Supply is the big issue. And I think supply will have to come from owners, as in property managers can't manufacture the houses. Yes, like there will be institutional investors that are starting to add inventory, like in the service department space and in multifamily space. But I still think that's going to be on the like there's a lot of money pushing into that too, but that's going to be a rounding error in the big space, in the big scheme. What we really need to do as an industry is we need to convince owners there's millions and millions of second homes out there, that it's safe to put those second homes into the rental market. And if as an industry, if we succeed at that, then we can create that supply that we also desperately need. And there's a lot of those homes out there. Now, what are the concerns? It's around liability, it's around insurance, it's around sort of how do I find a cleaner? How do I do all of this? So I think a big part of the solution is going to be either the platforms, and I keep on going back to the listing platforms because they're the ones that have been driven much of this growth, the supply growth, making it easier for people to host. That's why you see Airbnb entire focus around that, creating insurance products, anything that gives an owner peace of mind to put their property out there to rent it out. And it's going to be a big part of the equation. And making it easier. The second part is property managers being able to reach more owners, convince them of their value proposition, do so at a place where an owner feels safe to hand their property over to a manager, do so where the owner feels safe that the guests that are going to stay at their place are going to be safe and not going to damage it. And then as an industry we succeed in that, then we'll solve the biggest problem, which is supply acquisition and convincing millions and millions of owners who have second homes out there to actually rent those second homes. And I think that's the only big thing that we can do to make a dent. Institutional supply is not going to make a huge dent in the next few years.
Yeah, so Jessica, I'll just jump in off the back of that. Because Alex has already said the United States is the biggest market in the world in terms of vacation rentals, which we know is not correct, actually. There's more than 150,000 more properties in Europe. So there is a fantastic report by Residents from 2018 on millennials, and I'll post it. And it says a whopping 53% are considering or buying a vacation home one day, saying they would somewhat or very likely purchase a vacation home before buying their primary residence. And you have to ask the question, why is everybody, even my kids, walking around saying, I need to buy a second home, I need to rent it out. The interest rates are rubbish, it's got capital value going forward. It's dead easy to book it. All you got to do is stick it on Airbnb, use their onboarding system, use Properly's system, of course, for managing it after the event, and you're off at the races. And it's as simple as that. And then you talk to the big managers, and I won't name them, but if you actually speak to them at a fairly senior level, they say we're actually converting more people new to the market than we are actually poaching customers from other companies. So, I think Alex is spot on there, but there's a lot of social reasons and economic reasons why people are actually doing this. And the threat is regulation that's going to sit on top of this if it continues to accelerate so quickly that it causes hazards It causes neighborhood disturbances. The Italians will identify taxes they can make out of this, and then there's reporting, and then there's technology which has to run it, which is pretty dysfunctional still. I think Marcus might agree.
Well, I think right now we're seeing a demand, or well, a supply issue that is quite temporary. If you try to buy a sofa anywhere in the world today, you see the same supply issue. You say, or a car, you see, you can't buy it right now, but maybe in 8 months. We did a data piece here recently on travel to the US and opening up. It was interesting to see that the traffic to the airline sites, the searches for airlines, air tickets from Europe to US, had a massive spike the moment they announced that it's going to open up. But the amount of tickets actually booked was way lower than that spike. And the reason is very simple. If you don't have family here who you can stay with, there's nothing left to rent. No matter where you want to go, there's nothing available anymore. If you want to travel, let's say this winter in a warm place in the US. Now the supply issue is temporary. It's gonna, Richard, your kids are gonna buy those properties and put their life. But there's also there's a lot of opportunities out there, like all the hotels that still don't have any visitors, or they're not able to be profitable. I live in the fourth biggest city here in North America, and I just saw this morning a report that everyone's back to the office, but there's still 77% empty. That's in the financial district of Toronto, 77% empty. Now, what happens to an office building when it stays empty too long? Well, obviously, it's turned into some other use. It can be turned into a factory or residential. And what happens to a residential that's commercially zoned? Well, that's fairly easy to put on Airbnb. And even today, when we speak to these funds and property developers or long-term property managers that manage thousands of properties, their short-term rental portfolio is usually less than 10%. So if you manage 2,000 properties, you're going to have less than 200 of them rented out short-term. That's where the supply will come from. I saw a lot of questions here about regulation. The regulation within cities is usually targeted towards residential properties. I personally think it's a problem that you take residential properties that are meant for long-term living and turn them into Airbnbs. But there's a very easy way around that regulation, and that's to simply don't work with residential properties. Take a commercial property, take an old factory, take an office building that's sitting empty, build units there. If you don't have the money, get a developer who can help you, get financing help, and then rent those out. They will be legal. And if your city outlaws Airbnbs for rental properties completely, then you're going to win the lottery, because the nightly rates will just shoot sky high. And that's where the supply is going to come from.
That's so interesting, Marcus. And I just want to throw this to Simon. Do you think that the supply will come from elsewhere? So it might come from the built to rent, it will come from multifamily, from hotels, from other buildings that, have had different use cases. Is that part of the solution?
Thank you, Jessica. It was very hard for me to be quiet for so long. Anyway, no, I think we see a lot of different models in the industry coming up right now with the multifamily, with the built to rent, et cetera, et cetera. So we see a lot coming in, but I think that's not going to move the needle. One thing that I definitely see, and Alex has raised that point in terms of supply growth, we're not addressing the supply that is not rented. Europe has a massive amount of not rented second home supply, massive. And that's, I sound like a broken record, but I always say one of the shittiest jobs we do in vacation rental, we're not good at communicating our value proposition. That we're busting our backside. The industry has so much professionalized with technology, with everything we do. We have systems in place. We can, people are probably still worried if they get money and they have a foreigner staying in their house. And I mean, we could argue if we assume that half of the secondary home supply, which is a lot more, is not rentable and not rented today. I mean, there is so much more supply that we can address instead of banging each other's head and taking supply from each other and targeting all the same supply. Airbnb has helped us to put a lot of supply out there. Yes, it has. But these owners are already educated to an extent. We need to get to grab that piece that is not out there yet. And we need to do so much more as an industry to create that awareness and be proud of what we do, because we do the heavy lifting. Sometimes this Airbnb conversation really makes me ill, because when we consult property management companies, I say, let's make a bet here. For 2 days, nobody's allowed to say the word Airbnb for 2 days. And then every time you say it, you need to put $10 into the box. And then after 2 days, we go drinking. We get so much money to drink, it's crazy. But the Airbnb is not adding anything to the value proposition. And this is what we need to communicate about to the market and to the owners, what vacation rental and property management is all about. It's not where it was when I started 2005 and Richard even earlier. I mean, it's come such a long way. And I think that's where we need to push, because one thing that you alluded to, the regulatory issue is going to crush us, right? And if we're not smart about this and we're taking build to rent and all this stuff, it's going to kill us, because that's not what we're here for, to kill our own business. And, on a closing note on this one is, when I moderated Victoria, who was the secretary of DHHA, and she closed her panel in Victor and said to the audience, ladies and gentlemen, if you're not taking this into your hands, the hotels will, and they will not do it in your favor. And that stuck to me like glue. And I think that's what it's all about. So create category awareness, do the communication on value proposition, and get together as an organization. It's too late when the regulatory issues come in and they say it's time to shut down. It's too late. We need to do that before. And because we're so fragmented, it's very challenging for us to stick together.
And how do you suggest, though, that we do stick together for this? So any sort of suggestions?
Life changes at your own nose tip, right? So if you can't change yourself, nobody else will. So I think that's where it starts. Number one, I think we're in a good way, but it's not done by just associations, because they're also very politically driven. I think there needs to be other advantages for companies who are in there providing these services to get together, and we need to have we need to have like think tanks and really get the industry leaders together that are not run by associations necessarily. I mean, one of the efforts that I see very effective in the United States is rent responsibly. I mean, rent responsibly is exactly the type of activity that we need. This is not this is giving the power to the community and bring the community together, bring the politicians and the players in the destination together, and the vacation rental and the community together. That's what Rent Responsibly does. So bringing everybody to the table to do education, everything else. John Ann, who just joined us in the United States, he had huge problems in Hawaii. It's a massive issue there. He pulled in Rent Responsible and said, guys, we need to do something together. We need to educate the local government. We need to get the community together and fight this. And they've been half successful already. So we have some great cases where it worked, but you need to include everybody into the community to make it happen, and not do single-minded activities.
Yeah, it's great. It feels like the last 2 years, the regulation topic has gone on the back burner, and it feels a little bit like it has been the sleeping giant just waiting for us all to kind of trip over. I think if we can just move on, which ties up the category awareness, the regulations, and also the supply. And it's actually about changing consumer behavior and preferences. And so in terms of, if we think of guests as consumers, what have we seen fundamentally changed over the last 2 years? And Marcus, do you want to start us on this?
Yeah, definitely one major change has been the locations and the type of trips people do. I think the reason why people travel is fundamentally different from why they traveled 2 years ago. Not for an individual who makes a trip. I'm sure many individuals make exactly the same trip, but looking at the overall demographics of those who are traveling, and there's a lot of demand for locations that haven't been used before, like the 6% of all the locations that Airbnb has. There's also a lot of demand for longer trips. So I'd say people with kids have a hard time at just picking up their bags and going for 3 months somewhere. But there's also a certain percentage of populations that don't have kids and that can pick up the bag and go somewhere for 3 months. And that's something that we're gonna continue seeing. International travel, like the case of Europeans wanting to fly to the US and need to find a plane ticket, but you can't find a place to stay. That will continue to be a problem as places open up and close down over the coming years. But one that's going to be fairly sure, if you have a place where people can drive to that's fairly nearby, and you can offer a new experience, maybe a mountain, maybe a lake, something that they don't see in their everyday life. That's something that's going to stay attractive for a very long time in the future.
Have guests' values and expectations fundamentally changed about what they're looking for from the properties that they stay in?
Yeah, Jessica, I mean, it's not rocket science what humans actually want, is it? You know, they want comfort, so kind of ask your dog. They want efficiency, they want delivery quickly, so ask Amazon. They want polite, nice, efficient service. Think of great waiters. They want modern facilities, at least as good as they get at home. So they're going to want smart TVs and media and great mattresses and everything else. I mean, there's just human nature, really, when you're going somewhere. COVID has done what Marcus said. It's restricted international travel. And then you've got these other things that are now appearing that are, we've got COP26 in the UK, we've got eco-friendly, we've got sustainability being thrown at you. And whether you like it or not, this is being absorbed into the human subconscious. There's no way you're going to get around this going forward. So they will expect some of these things. But humans are fairly simple individuals. You know, you meet them in bars, you meet them in restaurants, you meet them everywhere. But, you know, ask yourself, why do you order from Amazon when you hate yourself for doing it? It's a very simple thing. Are there big changes? The big changes, of course, are those things that are being influenced on us because the world is revolving in a slightly different way, and COVID's been the inflection point on it. But if you want a really good rental, it's really not rocket science, is it? If you've got a great location, you've got a lake, you can drive to it right now, etc. As long as your knives and forks are all in order in the drawer and the toaster doesn't chuck out crumbs, which is Simon's angst, and you look after it really well and you have all those things, you'll get bookings. It's simple as that. No, I don't think humans have changed a great deal.
So you basically summed up the elements of success there, Richard. So thank you for that. And then add profit onto it as well. Simon's key thing, you know, make sure there's the profit margins. But what about business travel? You know, we hear a lot about you know, the potential of business travel. I wrote something recently on it. Do you think that there is a potential for winning more business travel as guests, as customers?
I mean, I just mentioned London last week, Jessica, and I've been to London many, many times. In fact, I think Alex went to university there. And I've never come out of a restaurant at 11 o'clock at night and not been bumping into people or seeing cars rushing down the street or not been able to get a taxi. I walked out of a restaurant, there was nobody on the street. And you think to yourself, this is business. The business travelers are not there. They're coming in one day a week. So certainly there's a disruption there, and they want different things for that. So they are happy to stay there 2 and 3 nights a week in an urban vacation rental. Certainly their demands are probably slightly different than they were prior to COVID. And I don't really see that changing. I haven't yet met one person who says, I really want to sit on a train for 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening and hang around on a tube. But, you know, that's just my opinion. We're in a hyper-local industry, and that's kind of what I'm observing.
I agree a little bit, disagree a little bit. I think business travel is definitely changing. I don't think it's going to change as radically as we think. So things have a way of getting back to the mean. Yes, business travel is not going to go back to 100% for several years, for sure. Like, I'm convinced that it might never go back to 100% of what the traditional business travel was. I think many CFOs in large companies have looked at just what huge amounts of money they've saved in the last few years, last 18 months or so, and they'll remember that. Same thing, employees have realized that it is great if you don't have to sit on the tube for 2 hours to commute into central London and back again, and it's a waste of time. So I think some of those things are here to stay. Now, I think two things. Number one, we as a company have been for 18 months now, we've been 100% virtual. I don't think I'll surprise anybody that most people hate it. As in, you do want that human connection. You do want to sit in the same office with someone again. Yes, it has some great advantages, but you want that connection, or like at least sort of a short period of strong personal connection where you can look at someone's screen together, not over Zoom, have a beer, talk about business. So that's coming back, and we see it everywhere. I mean, people want to go back to the office. Now, I think it's going to spur a different type of business travel. We at Properly, what we've done in the past, and I think quite successfully, is we allowed people to work from home for most of the year, but then we all got together in a place for 2 or 3 weeks where we worked extremely intensely together. Like, that's where relationships are built. That's why people talk to each other. I think that's a huge opportunity for our industry, because you're not going to stay in a hotel when you do that. You're going to rent a house where you have multiple rooms where everybody actually lives together. So it's a new type of business travel that I think we'll see a lot more of. We also see a lot more of that paid for by companies. All of the San Francisco-based companies that I see right now, and I observe some of the same things that Richard's been talking about. There was a time in June when I got back to San Francisco, and San Francisco was a complete ghost town. You know, everybody had gone. People are coming back now, and companies are starting to pay for that. They want people to be in the same space again, but they recognize that they're not necessarily all going to live in the same place. So it's going to be a different type of business travel. So I think it's going to come back, not to the traditional one, not to 100%, but there's going to be new forms of business travel that will be very, very lucrative for the industry. And we as vacation rentals lend ourselves much, much better for those new forms of business travel than the traditional hotel industry.
Thank you. We haven't got much time, and I want to move on to talking about consolidation and investment. And we've seen recently SiteMinder and Cloudbeds, big news from both of those companies. Does this have any bearing, do you think, in the future for the short-term rental sector, these hotel tech companies? Anything that we should be thinking about that kind of thing? And any other predictions on that? Maybe Simon, you could kick us off. Absolutely.
I think that's a good one, SiteMinder and Cloudbeds. What does a going public mean? It means to have a one-off cash to finance their growth. And I think we already alluded on the supply side with hotels, being woken up and supply is going to converge. My prediction is also technology is going to converge. And we were always wondering, and how many years have we wondered, why are there still two distinct verticals when it comes to hotel tech and vacation rental tech? I think that's going to go away. And with that kind of cash, that's exactly what's going to go away. So with the type of conversation we're having and seeing others like Muse, and I'm going to actually see the CEO next week in Switzerland at a World Tourism Forum, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about in this. What are they going to in terms of technology? SiteMinder has been interested in our vertical for a long time, but I haven't been able to get their heads around, and they were too busy doing other things. Cloudbeds the same thing. And I think while it's fueled with additional private equity, I think now and our tech environment is extremely fragmented as well, and there's not that much muscles. And I think the hotel tech companies might be more legacy, but they're a lot larger, and SiteMinder is not legacy anymore. That's a different game. And also Cloudbeds, and I think we'll see them coming into our space, buying channel managers, buying PMSs, and getting really deep into that, because the supply, as it converges, the logic is becoming the same. We're not booking from Saturday to Saturday anymore. We do a lot of other things very similar. We have seamless entry, and we have very similar type of technologies now when it comes to check-in and check-out and guest communication. It's becoming more and more hotel-like, because that's what the consumer wants, especially the ones that we just gained for the vertical. He expects that to come, and I think the larger ones with deep pockets can make that happen.
So with this merger of hotels and short-term rentals, what are we going to call ourselves, Simon? Are we going to be just lodging? So the big conference in 3 years, is it going to be the lodging conference? It'd make my life easier if we just
It's
have
going to
one
be the
word.
Hospitality 3.0 conference. That's what it's going to
Okay.
be.
Okay. Great. And Marcus, do you want to add anything to this?
Cloudbeds have tried, and many others have tried entering the space before and never really succeeded. And I think the one barrier for them has always been the hotel customers. They run their business in a certain way. You have the guest physically walking through a very physical door and meeting a physical person at a physical front desk, something that doesn't really exist in the vacation rental world and has to be replaced by an online experience, which is why we're seeing so many softwares. Now, can these companies with this kind of money get into that other mentality? I'm sure some of them will be successful, but I think the same thing will happen as with the hotels who try to enter the vacation rental space. We only hear about the successful ones, but we don't hear about the hundreds of hotels that tried and failed. And I think it will be a very bumpy road, especially for large companies that are focused on hotels, to enter vacation rentals. Because in the hotel world, you can talk to big chains. And I'm not talking about the Hiltons and Marriotts. You can go to any country in the world and you'll find a chain that has 50 hotels, and you can cut them a deal. But it's substantially harder to cut a deal with 50 property managers in the US, because you need to work with each of them individually. On the VC side, though, just this morning, a company from right here raised 2 million again. Congratulations, Connect, if you're listening in. We're going to see a lot more of that taking place, because in order to make a good investment, you need a growing market, but you also need a market that's ripe for intervention, I would almost say. And I think right now for the vacation rental industry, we're reaching an inflection point where the winners will be clearly separated from the losers. And at the same time, there's so much auxiliary technology. I mean, I said before that we have over 100 partners on the marketplace, but there's also about 30 companies that are integrated into Hostaway right now that haven't necessarily even launched their products. And some of those are really innovative. I don't think that anyone working for a long time with hotels providing technology will be able to provide those kind of solutions that we're seeing that will be launched over the coming 6 or 12 months. And there's a lot of problems, even in vacation rental technology, that are still left unsolved, and that will bring a lot of growth to the technology sector overall.
Simon, you're nodding quite a bit. Did you want to add to that?
Nothing to add. I see that exactly. The only thing I want to add, we see capital coming all in the other sectors as well. But I think, we have a lot of property managers here as well. I think people need to be careful in terms of valuations, just because it's gold mining town and we see these IPOs and these SPACs and everything else, and everybody gets confused with massive valuations. Be careful. Be super careful, because the private equities have also found out that our industry is brutally fragmented, nothing there to buy, too hard to do. So they will go back very quickly. So I think that I will be more, this is my clear opinion, that I will be more on the tech than they will be on property management. PEs find that too hard. Who is doing this consolidation? This is too brutal. We have never seen more venture and private equity capital at VRMA than this year. I've run into so many of them. When you start educating them what this industry is all about, they're like, this is too hard. And we're looking at tech, and there's a bigger opportunity to make meaningful equity growth than it is in vacation rental and property management, without a doubt. That's not going to be repeated very quickly to the valuations that we're seeing right now. So people shouldn't be blinded in what they're expecting if they want to sell their business.
Yeah. Yes, as you know, I've had a hand in channel management, PMS systems, and web builders, a bit like Marcus over the years. So I'm going to agree with Simon and Marcus on this. The money's coming, and it's under the heading of prop tech, which is so attractive, but it could be fatal. But it is a really difficult segment to enter because of the hyper-localization, different languages, different tax systems, different distribution, different marketing channels, different pricing, different absolutely everything. So it's going to come, but it's going to be a challenge for sure.
I'd just like to say something. Gretchen Walker has just put in the chat, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it, right? You know.
That's why everybody started a PMS.
We are actually at time here, but I'm going to just ask all of you to just quickly say the one thing that you're most excited about watching next year. And Alex, if you could just say, what is it that you're really, you know, what have you got your eye on for next year?
Owners. It's all about owners. How do we get owners into the industry? And I think we'll succeed at that, but we have to make the owners, we have to make it easier for owners.
Great. Thank you, Richard.
Watching where the investment makes big mistakes.
Okay, Marcus.
I'm looking very much forward to the IPOs of property managers, catching up with sideminders, seeing how the capital markets are going. I'm wondering who's going to be the first company or the next company in our industry to raise over 100 million. And that's what really excites me here. Okay, great. And Simon, what's going to get you out of bed in 2022? With excitement?
Many things. I think it's going to be the most amazing year in vacation rental that we have seen the last 17 years that I've been in it, without a doubt, in terms of growth, in terms of being hyped on all, you know, we are the fastest and the quickest recovered travel vertical that the world has ever seen. So let's face it, we are sitting on now a vertical that is finally recognized. It's only taken us 20 years to be recognized, but now we are. So we need to make sure we keep it that way. There's a lot of work ahead. We need to do a lot of stuff together, but I think all in all, it's going to be a super successful year, and the tech space is going to be consolidated without a doubt. It's going to be changing very quickly.
Yeah, great. There's so much to look forward to. And I'm going to wrap it up now because we've just gone over time. But just to say thank you so much to all of you. It's been really great hearing your thoughts. And especially to all the attendees, thank you so much for coming along. And I will say, if anyone wants to get in touch with any of these guys, I think you know where to find them. They're all on LinkedIn, and please just go ahead and if you want to know more, you can directly ask them. I'm actually offering you up for that, didn't ask you, but I'm assuming you'd be happy to answer any sort of additional questions. And big thank you to Hostaway. Marcus, thank you so much for hosting this event. And I know that the recording will go out by email to everyone that's registered, and will also be on Hostaway's social channels, YouTube, etc. And is there a final word that you want to say, Marcus, before we wrap up?
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. It's great to see so many friends here in the audience and on the panel. I just have two messages from our corporate sponsor, Hostaway. First of all, if you're a technology company out there and you're planning to launch a product, or you're just launched, go to the Hostaway marketplace. Fill in the form, let's get in touch. If we can't offer you anything to you, then please I can offer you some advice. The second thing is I wanted to tell everyone out there is that we are growing tremendously fast, and as a result of that, we haven't had time to update our recruitment page. We're going to get to that eventually, but in the meanwhile, if you feel like your job is giving you satisfaction in life and you want to join the bidding team, then please send me a message on LinkedIn. We're hiring for all positions right now.
Great, thank you very much. So thank you all, and have great days, evenings, everything. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us.
Thanks
everyone.
Good night.